So let's take a look at each of these steps in more detail. The first thing to do is find a model suitable to be animated. I'm going to load the model dino.max. This is actually included with this training set. It's in the tutorials folder. And this model is of a little character, a little alien sort of dinosaur character. Let's maximize the viewport, and you can do that with the min-max toggle button. Maximize the currently selected viewport, which is the perspective view, and let's use the arc rotate to take a look at this model from all sides. He's fairly simple. There's no holes in him. It's all one piece. So far he looks pretty good for being animated. What you can also do is right-click on the perspective viewport label and choose edged faces, and that'll give you a view of how the faces are distributed on the model. Now this is very important when choosing a model for animation. What you want is a model like this that has rectangular shaped faces for the most part that are evenly spaced. You don't want any long skinny triangular faces. Those are generally hard to animate because they don't bend well, I guess you could say, and you're going to want to bend this model's elbows and shoulders and knees and so on. So you want something that has these nice evenly spaced faces that will be easy to bend and move around. Now the other thing you can do is take a look at how the model is created. In this case we'll select the model and go to the Modify panel, and you can see that this is an editable poly. Now what this means is that this has sub-objects. We can see by clicking the plus. We can edit this model by changing the vertices and polygons and so on. Sometimes you're going to get a model that you're going to need to edit a little bit to make it easier to animate. In this case this one's fine, so we'll just leave him the way it is. Also you can take a look at the number of faces the model has. The fewer faces, the quicker it's going to update when you're animating. You want enough faces so there's enough detail to animate well, but not so much that it takes too long to update on the screen. So we can go to the File menu and choose Summary Info. And here you can see the faces selection here, or rather the faces display. And this model has 2,360 faces, which is pretty low. It's a nice low number. We'll be able to animate this model in real time on the screen. We won't have to keep hiding the model and then unhiding it and rendering. We can just play it right on the screen. We'll be able to see the animation right away. That's very helpful when you're animating a character. So let's get rid of our edged faces. We right click and turn it off, and then click the min-max toggle again to go back to our 4 viewport display. And next we're going to create the biped to start animating the model. So now we're going to create the biped skeleton. The easiest way to explain the biped is to go ahead and make one, and then I'll go over all the parts of it. So you want to go to the Create panel and click Systems and click Biped, and then click and drag in the front viewport or the perspective view, and you're going to create this skeleton and make him about the same height as the character. Can be a little taller or a little smaller. And let's go ahead and take a closer look at the biped here. He's got spine links and arms, legs, feet. He's built like a human skeleton, but you can easily alter this skeleton to look more like an alien or an animal or whatever you like. And in this case, we're going to eventually alter this skeleton so that it fits our Dino character perfectly. Now taking a look here in the front viewport, if we zoom in here to this bit that's selected, that's what's called the center of mass. Let's zoom out a little so you can see that better. That's right there at the center of the biped's pelvis. That's the controlling object for the entire biped. When you want to move the biped or rotate the entire biped around, this is the object that you select. Everything is eventually linked to that. So let's take a look at what our biped is created of. If you scroll down on your Create panel, you'll see that there's all these different settings for neck links, spine links, and so on. You can actually give the biped more spine links and more fingers, less fingers, and so on. The best way to do this is not necessarily on this panel because, like other create panels, as soon as you click on something else, you can't change anything here. You have to go to another panel. Now, with most geometry in 3ds Max, you would go to the Modify panel. But with a Character Studio biped, you want to go to the Motion panel. That's where all the controls are. If you click Motion, you'll see that you've got all these nice colorful buttons that aren't usually there in regular old 3ds Max. These are all your Character Studio biped buttons. Now we want to pose this skeleton to match our character, and to do that we want to be in this certain mode called figure mode. So you have to click figure mode here to turn it on. Now it's not going to change the display or anything like that. All that's changed is this button is on, but it's very important to have this on while you're posing the skeleton. So go ahead and make sure that's on. Now let's go down and take a look at the different structure elements for the biped. We have 4 spine links right now. I think that 3 would be plenty for this character, so we can go ahead and change it to 3. Leg links are fine. 3 refers to a thigh and a calf and a foot, which is what we want. Fingers. Our character has a thumb and 3 fingers, which totals out to 4 fingers. Finger links. Let's take a look here in the left view and we can see what those finger links are. Basically, a finger link is one of the areas between 2 joints in your finger. It's a bone extension, and this particular character really just needs 2 finger links. Now, as far as toes are concerned, if your character has sort of feet that are almost like shoes like this, you really only need 1 toe, and you're going to make it a big wide toe. So we're going to change this to 1 toe and 1 toe link. And the skeleton is pretty much ready to be fitted to the character. So the first step in posing the biped is to move the biped's center of mass to the appropriate and corresponding location on the model. So the center of mass is this little doohickey here, as we mentioned, and you just use the regular old move tool and you go ahead and move it there. Now you recall, over here we have figure mode on. This you should definitely do when you have figure mode on. If you don't have it on, turn it on and do it again. Now let's check in our other viewports. And we want to make sure that the center of mass is right about, sort of inside the model, inside his belly, across from his belly button. Right about in that spot. Maybe down a little bit more. And centered right on the character. Okay, now it looks a little strange. The legs are sticking out and nothing seems to be in the right place, but we'll straighten it out shortly. Now, one thing that's helpful to do here before we pose the biped to fit the model is let's select the model, and we're going to turn this to a smooth and highlights viewport, but we're also going to put this model in see-through mode so we can see what's going on with the biped. And the way you can do that is you just hit Alt-X on your keyboard. And now we have X-ray vision and we can see right through the model and see the biped. Now it's also a good idea to freeze the model so you don't accidentally pick it up and move it while you're trying to pose the biped. So I'm going to right click on the model and just pick freeze selection. So now it's frozen and see-through, and we can go ahead and work with the biped more easily with the model. Now this is a good time to save. So let's go ahead and do a file and a save as. Now what I like to do when I'm saving as I'm going along, we're going to save several versions of this. So what you can do is click this plus button here. And what that does is that adds the number 1 to the end of the file name, as you can see up here, Dino01. And the next time you save, you can click the plus again and it will save it to Dino02, and then the next time to Dino03, and so on. So you don't save over your work. And you're saving a new version each time, but you don't have to keep typing in the number. So the first step in posing the biped is to pose the legs. So let's maximize the front viewport here, and we'll get a closer look at the leg area. And let's start with one leg. We want to rotate this into place. So we're going to use our select and rotate, and as long as the figure mode is on, which it is, then we're all set. And we'll start rotating the leg. Now if you've got angle snap on, you want to turn it off. It's going to be a lot easier to move it into place. So you rotate the leg into place and get it going down the center of the leg as best you can. We'll talk about what you do if it won't go down the center in a minute. We'll get to that later. But for now, just get it going down the center as best you can, and then you want to use your scale and scale the leg along its length. Now we want the length of this thigh to end right about where the character's knee is. You want that little round thing right where his knee is. That's pretty close. Then we're going to scale the calf. And we want to get that little ball right around where the ankle joint is. And then we take the foot and scale it so that it goes down to the ground. Now obviously this isn't quite right yet. It's not going down the center of the leg, but again we'll fix that up in a minute. What we want to do with this now is we've only done one leg, and we want to get the other leg to look more like this short one. So we can select the short leg and come over here to the copy paste rollout, and our posture button is clicked, which is what we want. We're going to copy the posture of this leg to the other side. So we can click copy posture, which copies the posture of the selected leg parts, which is the thigh, calf, and foot. And then we're going to use paste posture opposite, and that will paste it to the other side. And look, there it is, right up there. Okay, so let's take a look at these two legs. We've got a little bit of a strange thing going on here. Even though the center of mass is pretty much at the center of the body, the legs aren't lined up. So let's double check the center of mass. Let's go back to wireframe mode so we can select it and see it a little bit better. And let's look at this here. Now the center of mass is lined up with the center line of the body. So it doesn't seem like we should move it around. It's in a pretty good spot. But the legs still aren't lined up. So what this means is that this model wasn't created exactly symmetrically, and this is going to happen to you from time to time, so you need to know how to fix it up. So what you do in that case is you just go ahead and rotate each leg individually so that the thigh and calf go down the center. Now if that doesn't work and you can't get them to go exactly right, another option you have is to select the pelvis and to use your scale and scale the pelvis on its local z-axis. And that also gives you a wider stance or a narrower stance. Let's try making this just a little bit wider. Might make things work a little better. And now we rotate the leg back to go down the center. And there, that's pretty good, just the way it is. And we'll work some more on the feet a little later on, but this is fine for now. And this is a good time to save. So let's go ahead and go File, Save As, and click the plus to save Dino 02. So now let's take a look at posing the spine and the arms. Now when you take a look at what you've done so far, it looks pretty odd. You've got this skeleton partially parked inside a character. Don't worry about it, just work with one part at a time, and eventually it's all going to look very nice. Alright, so the next step is select all the parts of the spine, which are these 3 spine links right here, and we're going to do some scaling. Now the idea here is we're going to scale the spine down so that we can get the shoulders here lined up with the character shoulders. So that's about right. Basically, you want these little balls here to be right at where the character's shoulder joint is. So this is where the character would flex their shoulder from. So let's take one of the arms and rotate that into place. So basically, posing the biped, you do a lot of rotating and a lot of scaling. Those are the 2 primary activities. Now that goes in pretty well. So let's copy and paste that to the other side. Now, if it didn't go in pretty well, if this wasn't going right down the center of the arm, the best thing to do is select the spine links and scale them again. You don't want to get all caught up in trying to rotate these arms to try to jam them into the armhole. Just scale the spine lengths to get this shoulder joint to line up. Alright, we're going to get to the arms a little later on. Right now the upper arm is okay, but the lower arm and the hands obviously need some work. But let's look at the neck now. So the neck link is this little link right in here, the one just above the top spine link. And basically we want to scale that so that the bottom of the biped head lines up with the character's chin. Now when we scale this up, we see that we've got this one very long neck link here, and wouldn't it be nice to have a couple of neck links in here so that we can animate the character's neck? Because right now his neck won't bend. There's only one link there. So what we can do is close up this copy-paste rollout, go back to our structure rollout. We can actually add neck links at this point. So let's make 3 neck links. Now they're kind of long, so let's go ahead and select them. Oh, we selected the eyes. Don't want to do that. Here, let's freeze the eyes. Okay, now we can select the neck links and scale them down so the biped's chin and the character's chin are right about at the same spot. Now we're going to scale the head. Oops. Right up to the top, the character's head. Scale it out a little bit so it fills it out. Okay, this is a good time to save. We're going to do a file, save as, with a plus again. Now before we go on to the next step, let's just take the links that we can see that are posed pretty well, and we're going to scale them out to fill out the character. Now something happens here. When this upper spine link scales, it scales out the shoulders. So what you want to do is scale these shoulders back in. We'll select both of these links, which are called the clavicles. These two right here, up at the upper shoulder, are the clavicles. So we scale those back in. You could scale the lowest spine link, and it's not going to affect anything. And let's take a look at this one, scale it out a little bit. The sizes of these bones is going to affect the area around them that they influence when you animate the bones. So if you widen this out, it's going to affect the area around it. If it's too skinny, it's not going to affect the area around it automatically. You're going to have to do a lot of adjustment. But in general, you want to keep the biped inside the character mesh. Okay, so let's save it again. Save as with a plus. Now let's take a look at the model from the side view and see how our proportions are working out. If we take a look at the left viewport here, we can see a few obvious problems. Some of the stuff is a little too skinny. For example, the head doesn't need to go all the way out past the character's nose, but filling up the head most of the way. And let's take a look at this neck. It's not quite going up the center. However, the shoulder, it's almost in the center. We can take this topmost spine link and rotate it forward just a little bit. Okay, now the shoulder node is going through the center of the shoulder, and the neck is going up more the center of the neck. Let's see how the head looks. Looks pretty good. Maybe we can scale it up a little bit more. There we go. Now the spine links aren't quite wide enough here. And the legs, they're not quite going through the center. So let's see, how are we going to fix that? Well, we could rotate the leg and make it go more through the center, but that's not really what we want. The hips need to be more forward. So what we need to do in this case is we need to take the center of mass and move it forward. The center of mass is diamond shaped, so we know we have it selected. And we're going to move it forward a little bit. Let's take a look. And now we're going to rotate this leg right through the center, and then rotate the bottom part of the leg. That looks pretty good. So let's do the same with the other leg. Alright, and now the spine is off. We need to rotate the spine back the way it came before. There we go. Now, as you can see, it's just a matter of working back and forth and back and forth. You have to scale and rotate until everything is fitting pretty well. Now with this foot, we need to scale this. And that toe there at the end, we've got this tiny little toe, and we want to scale that past the end of the toe and up a bit, and we can move it up. There. The next step is to apply physique to the mesh so we can associate the biped with the mesh. So the first thing we have to do is unfreeze the mesh. We can do that by just doing a right click and unfreeze all. And it doesn't matter whether we leave the mesh as see-through, but let's turn it off for now. So we select it and click Alt-X. Okay, now we need to apply physique as a modifier. So on the Modify panel, pick the physique modifier from the modifier list. And now the next step is we're going to need to click on the center of mass, so we need to be able to see it. So we'll change back to wireframe, zoom in, and then we click this Attach to Node button right here on the physique rollout, and right after that, click the center of mass. This physique initialization dialog comes up, and for the most part you just want to leave the default settings the way they are. They're fine for now. Click Initialize. After a few moments you see this orange skeleton line that has been put through the entire mesh. You can see it going through the arms, down the fingers, down the legs, and so on. You want to make sure that you can actually see the tips of the orange skeleton coming through on the fingers and the toes, because that means that you've done it correctly. So physique is applied. It looks pretty good. So the next step is to check the envelopes and see how they're working. Now what an envelope is here, if we expand our physique sub-objects, the first one is envelope. And this is the area around each. And let's get a really good look at what's going on here. If we switch this to a front view and then go back to frame 0, now we can really see the shape of this envelope. So we'll be able to see if it's being properly pasted on the other side. So we'll select this other side and click Paste. Now you can see the envelope is the same as the one over here, but we really want it to be mirrored the other way so that the big part is over here on the hips and the flatter part is between the legs. So you could try clicking this mirror button here, but take a look at what it does. It actually just mirrors it upside down, which isn't really what we want. So I wouldn't really recommend it. I'm just going to mirror it back the other way, the way it was originally. So what works better is to, again, go back to your control points and select all the control points on this, and then do a rotation. See if we do a local, yeah, there we go. And you can spin this whole thing around so that you've got something that more closely resembles what you want. Let's see, that's about right, I believe. Let's take a look at the other one. Well, it certainly looks more like it. Let's take a look in our user view. Yep, not too bad. Alright, and then let's take a look with the animation. Boy, that's looking pretty good. Nice and smooth here, no creases. Okay, so we've successfully copied and pasted and adjusted an envelope on the other side. This is probably a really good time to save. So let's do our save as again. The next thing to concern ourselves with is our character's little bottom there. His backside here. This tail is not being affected by any envelopes as far as I can see. Not that one. Let's get our wireframe view back. Let's see if it's affected by this one. Nope. Now we also have these two other envelopes in here. Let's get a front view again. These two right here for this link and that link, the two going down from the spine to the tops of the thighs. And these are often these odd-shaped envelopes here, kind of going to the side. And those are, I find those, that whatever they're affecting, it's usually not good. So I like to just reduce those down. Take the radial scale for both and then for outer to 0 so they don't affect anything. And then I just copy and paste that to the other side. Then you don't have these sort of weird twisty envelopes to have to deal with. So this one here, this is the one that should be affecting the tail, and it's not. So of course, we're just going to go ahead and use our control point. Pick one of those control points. And see now, these vertices are all, they have red on them to indicate that they are going to be affected. If we go to our smooth view, we can see that that's now true. Oops. So now his little tail will move along, so if we have him walking along, his tail isn't going to get left behind. Alright, let's take a look all the way up the rest of the spine. Oops, we got to go back to links. That looks pretty good. That could probably be a little better, but we'll leave that for now. Let's take a look in wireframe view. The arm is affecting all of the arm, which is good. The shoulder is affecting this. Oh, I see what's happening here. See, this envelope is going all the way out to here and affecting the arm. That's not good. So let's decrease the radial scale for both. And you can see the arm kind of coming back in the way that it should be. Except for this vertex right there. Oh, this one's too big too. So let's reduce the outer. Actually, that should be fine, because what it's doing is it calculates the envelopes when it's in this rest position that we're at frame 0, the position it was in when you applied physique. So even if the radial scale goes out to here, that should be fine. If it starts going out bigger than that, it's going to start affecting the arms. But that should be fine there. That should be fine there. We've got something going on here. This vertex, for whatever reason, isn't going along with the arm. Oh, I see. It's not even big enough to affect that. So let's bring that out a little bit. There we go. Okay. Now we have a different problem, that the arm is, when it comes in, it's going into the chest. So what needs to happen is this armpit area needs to be affected partially by the chest and partially by the arm, so that it won't just rotate with the arm, it will rotate a little bit, but not a lot. So let's bring that in like this again. Let's see what happens. Alright, see if we pull this out a bit. Just looking at this side, don't look at the other side because we haven't done anything with that yet, but just looking at this. And because I'm in footstep mode, footsteps are the only thing being selected, and just press delete. So now the footsteps are gone. He's jumped to the end of the sequence, but that's okay. Now I'm going to create a new walk cycle, create multiple footsteps, and this time I'm going to say 12 footsteps. Say OK. And create keys for the footsteps. So now he walks. And if I select all the footsteps and use bend, this is what we get as a result. So you can see footsteps are really handy for just getting your basic animation set up. To do this with freeform would take quite some time. So it's a good idea to get the basic foot motion laid down with footsteps and then convert to freeform if that's what you want to use. But you can do quite a bit with just footsteps alone. So I'm going to save this as walk circles. Now let's take a look at some of the other ways you can work with footsteps. We're going to get rid of these footsteps and put some new ones in. You can either press the delete key on the keyboard, or we've got this nice delete footsteps button over here. So now they're gone. And if you don't like the way the biped looks after you get rid of the footsteps because he's doing something funky, you can always put him in figure mode, and then when you take him back out again, he'll stay right where he is because he doesn't have any animation on him. So we'll go back into footstep mode here, and we're going to put a new set of walk footsteps on him. 8 should be sufficient. And we activate the footsteps. Now suppose you've done this animation and he's walking through and that's all fine, but then you say, well, what I really want is I want him to sort of move his feet in place. I want him to stand in place and just kind of stamp his feet up and down a little bit. Then what you could do is you could take his feet, his footsteps, and move them underneath him here. Just so you can see what's going on, we're just taking these footsteps and moving them so they're sort of under his body. Footsteps can be on top of one another. There's no problem with that at all. So now, when you animate, his feet just move in place. Some of the feet are stepping on top of one another here, though. Let's move some of these footsteps away so we don't have that problem. Now that one goes over there. Let's try it again. So now he's not stepping on top of his own feet anymore. But it looks a little funny. If you look at when he's bending his knees, there's a little bit of a popping that goes on here. The knees are kind of snapping. They're doing something strange. There's a reason for this. The reason is that when you originally set keys for these footsteps with this Create Keys button, it created keys for a biped that's walking forward. The footsteps were all laid out in front of him. Now they're underneath him, and the leg motion is going to be different. When you walk in place, it's not the exact same motion as walking forward. There are some differences in the way your knees bend and so on. So what you need to do is deactivate the footsteps and then activate them again, because when you create keys for them again, when you activate them, it creates keys for them where they are at that time. So right now they're underneath him. We want new keys for the footsteps being underneath him. So we go ahead and select these footsteps, and we've got this nice button here, Deactivate Footsteps. And that deactivates them just so you can activate them again. Deactivating them actually doesn't get rid of the keys. He still moves around. It's just something you do so that you can click this button here, Create Keys for Inactive Footsteps. Now it recreates the keys just for those footsteps, and let's see how he looks now. So it's a lot smoother motion now. He doesn't have this kind of snapping of the knees or funny looking movement. Nice smooth movement of the feet going from one to the other. So the moral of the story there is that if you're going to make a big change to the footsteps, you're going to move them a lot or rotate them a lot or just make some really substantial change to them, you should deactivate the footsteps and then activate them again to get the best possible motion. I'm going to save this one. as walk in place. So far, when we've been talking about footstep animation, we've just been talking about the animation of the legs and feet. We haven't done anything with the upper body, and there is a reason for that. You can set keys for the arms and the rest of the body in the usual way. If we turn off footstep mode, put on auto key, we could, for example, choose this arm, and that arm, the one that's closer. So now we've brought GraphXL down to about 1/5 of its value. So it looks like he's sort of walking on the moon. Good for slow motion. It's also good for just tweaking the gravity if Character Studio hasn't quite calculated it correctly. Now, one caution is that once you change it, there's no way to go back to the original value. There's no reset button. So you have to pretty much remember what it was. So that's how you can play around with the gravity. And I'm going to save this. As Dino Jump Gravity. You can also delete footsteps and change footstep numbers to change their sequence. I'll show you how that works. Let's get rid of these footsteps and start over with some jump footsteps. Now we've got this jump sequence, hopping in the air. Now suppose you want him to hop on one foot. That's easy enough. What you do is just delete these footsteps. Delete that one, that one. Now notice, as I delete them, the footsteps are renumbering themselves. 0, 1, 2. We've got 3 and 4. We're going to get rid of 4. Just have 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's take a look at that. So the other foot is still moving with it, but there's no footstep for it. Let's deactivate, reactivate. Now it looks a little better. He's hopping along on one foot. Again, not the greatest jump in the world, but a starting point. Now let's try something a little more complicated. Now before we do, let's look in track view and just see how that looks. That's what the footstep sequence looks like. You've just got 4 footsteps. There's no blue footsteps at all. The top part's blank. So let's try this with a different one. Let's make a walk sequence. And this time what I want to do, and I'm going to do this before I activate the footsteps, is I want one foot to stay still while the other one sort of taps on different parts on the ground, sort of like the beginning of a dance step. You keep one foot still and the other one says dun 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 dun, you know, moves around a bit. So let's keep the right foot on the ground and let's move the left foot around. Alright, so first of all, to do that, we don't want any of these right footsteps. So we select this, and that's footstep number 3, and get rid of it. And notice this is renumbered now, so this is number 3. We only need one right footstep because the foot's going to stay still the whole time. You only want a footstep for a time when the foot is going to need to be planted down. It's going to need to come from being in the air to being planted down, or in this case just to start out being planted down. We don't want this foot to lift, so it doesn't need to come back down, so we don't need any more right footsteps. Then we can take these left footsteps, sort of move them near. Let's see, are there any more? Nope, that's it. So now, when we activate these footsteps, see what you get. Now, the right foot's hopping around. That's not quite what we wanted. We wanted the right foot to stay still. So let's take a look at track view. And this footstep here is only lasting until frame 34. If I click the end of it, so I just get this one dot here, I can stretch this Stretch this out until it reaches 108, which is the end of footstep number 4. And let's take a look at that. So now the foot stays down while the other foot goes. Now it's a little funky because we didn't deactivate and reactivate, so let's do that. Deactivate, reactivate, and let's look at it again. Zoom out a little, just look at the feet. Alright, looks alright. Now one of the problems is that for some reason he's sort of rising up in the air. You see that? The foot's coming out of the footstep. This happens sometimes. You can fix it easily enough. I'll show you how when we start working with the upper body animation. So that's basically a dance with one foot staying planted down and the other one moving around. And again, that's what this looks like in track view. You've got one planted down and the other foot moving around. Let's go ahead and save that. We'll call this Dance 1. Now let's take a look at how we can make this process easier. We can actually create these footsteps. At the time we create them, we can create them so that they're more in this pattern here, the way that we want them to be. Let's get rid of these footsteps.